Hello, and welcome to Follow Your Curiosity, where we explore the ups and downs of the creative process and how to keep it moving. I'm your host, Nancy Norbeck. I am a writer, singer, improv comedy newbie, science fiction geek, and creativity coach who loves helping right-brained folks get unstuck. I am so excited to be coming to you with interviews and coaching calls to show you the depth and breadth both of creative pursuits and creative people, to give you some insight into their experiences and to inspire you. I am really excited to introduce you to Jennifer Nasta Zefutie, the co-founder and co-producing artistic director of the Pegasus Theatre Company here in central New Jersey. I've known Jennifer for quite a while, and the story of her theatrical journey, which you'll hear shortly, is both fascinating and inspiring. We talk about loss aversion, which says we fear loss more than we anticipate gain, perfectionism, defining success for yourself, and yes, and the improv rule we both think is a fantastic guide to a meaningful, open life. Yes, that's a hint. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Jennifer. You are one of the rare people in the real world who manages to make a living doing the things she loves, especially when that thing is acting. And so
well, I'm thrilled to be here. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know, because I've talked to a couple people who, have gone to New York and done their thing and eventually came back home and said, this isn't quite for me. This isn't exactly what I had in mind. And you've done something so different from that. So I am really curious to hear how you got started in the first place. Did you always know when you were a little kid that this was something you wanted to do, or did you come to it later, or how did that go?
I came to it a bit later. I wanted to be a singer when I was a kid. That's really what I wanted to do, and acting was something that never occurred to me. And I went off to college, and I was majoring in biochemistry and minoring in English because I thought I was going to be a doctor. And my sophomore year, I took one of the basic level English classes that you need to graduate, one of the core canon classes. And we were given an assignment, and we had to sort of stage it out in the classroom. And I remember I was a tree. So we made this poster board, tree, and I stuck my head in it. It was for an epic poem. We had to recite lines. And I mean, it was ridiculous. It was absurd. But after that, the professor of that class, Suzanne Westfall, who was also a director in the drama program, came up to me and she handed me a script and said, "We're auditioning for this play. I want you to come to the auditions." And she was probably one of the most intimidating women I've ever met in my life because she's brilliant and strong and is the type of person who knows something about everything and can have a conversation about anything and is just dynamic and you could just feel the creative energy coming off of her. Mm-hmm. So I tried to give her every excuse under the sky why I couldn't audition because I was terrified. My God, you have to memorize lines, and what do you do if you forget them? And singing seemed so much safer because you were up there with music, and it was easier to improvise if you forgot words. And who forgets words to songs?
Right.
Everybody knows songs, that type of thing. But she wouldn't take no for an answer and pretty much told me, well, if you can't come to the auditions, you can come to my office and privately audition for me during office hours. So I ended up going to auditions, and it was for Tom Stoppard's Arcadia, which is a pretty heavy lift of a show. Yeah. And I was cast in the lead of Thomasina.
Wow. She was serious for a reason.
Yeah. And, so once I sort of got over the terror of that, we started rehearsing. I was like, okay, this is kind of fun, but I didn't really know what I was doing. And about 2 weeks into rehearsal, Suzanne stands up and looks at me and says, "Jennifer Nasta, you are the one miserable spot in this otherwise happy play. Start acting." And again, I was horrified.
Sure.
And I stood there and was like, I didn't even want to audition. I have no clue what I'm doing up here. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing to act. I didn't ask for that. I just went on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And she turned to me and she said, you didn't act at all in high school? You've never done this before? And I said, no. And she's like, okay, come see me in my office hours tomorrow afternoon and we'll talk through this. And we sat there and she started teaching me how to break down a script and sort of the elements that go into character. And I learned a ton in that first show and just absolutely fell in love with the process. And she continued to mentor me and, eventually sort of ushered me into attending the National Theater Institute. But it was that show that pretty much, and that experience, as horrifying as it was to begin with.
Wow.
That just made me absolutely fall in love with it.
I'm kind of amazed that it never occurred to her that you might not have done this before, considering how much resistance you put up. Because that's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, you did everything but call in dead,
Pretty much. Yeah, I mean, the only reason I even went to the audition was because I was afraid for my grade in that class,
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise I probably would have called in dead.
So sorry. Can't come today.
Yeah.
Wow. So do you stay in touch with her? Did you stay in touch with her for a while?
Yes, we are still in touch. She is still a huge supporter of mine and of Pegasus, my theater company. So it's been wonderful, sort of having her be part of at least seeing the evolution of my career. And, I'll go back to her for advice and suggestions for plays and that sort of thing. And what else is interesting is another actress that was in Arcadia with me, and we became very good friends, lost touch over the years because this was back in the 90s, and I mean, email hadn't even caught on yet, so it was very difficult to sort of stay in touch with people. We've since reconnected, and she is now on our board of trustees.
Oh, very cool.
So, yeah. So, I think that first theatrical experience has been very important just to the entire evolution of my career.
Sure. Well, and I think it's kind of interesting because people talk about jumping in the deep end or trial by fire, but I mean, you had your trial by fire at the very beginning.
Yeah, everything since then has been, really not scary at all in comparison, which is a little bit of a blessing, I think, in a business that is so wrought with, rejection, and having to take risks in the face of failure. So sort of getting that out of the way right at the start.
Exactly. I mean, you can survive that.
It was helpful. Yeah.
Then what can't you do? Which I think
I'm sure there's a long list, but but I mean, one of the things they tell you as an actor is anytime a director asks you if you know how to do something, your answer is always yes. Like if you're in an audition and the director says, "Oh, by the way, do you know how to play the oboe?" You say yes, and then you figure it out. You never say no. It's yes, and then how do I do this? Do you know how to ride a horse? Sure, I can ride a horse. God, you get cast, you know what? You go out and you take a few horseback riding lessons. Or you take a couple oboe lessons. Yeah.
So improv. Yes, and.
Yes, and. That's right.
Man. I'm becoming more and more convinced that yes, and is a great life philosophy.
I really think it is too. It's the one way to really just leave yourself open to whatever opportunities the universe is going to present to you.
Yeah.
It's just this approach of complete openness.
Yeah. It's like, oh, here's this thing. Okay. And I think a lot of us, we're so used to saying no to things that we don't realize how often we do it. Whereas if you...
Right. And you end up saying no to things before you even consider them.
Right. Right. And, you know, if you start to think about just even the things that you encounter on a daily basis and saying yes and to them instead, you start to realize how often you say no without thinking about it. Even, you know,
Absolutely.
because I'm just doing that in the last, 2 minutes and realizing, wow, how many things have I said no to without really thinking about it just in the last week or the last day or two. It's a
sure.
big number. And I think, so I've been,
because no is so often tied to can't.
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that. No, because it can't happen. No, because it's impossible. No, because, that's nothing I could ever do. And I just don't believe that's the case for almost anything.
Yeah. And I would add,
I just really don't.
Yeah, I would add no, because that scares the absolute living hell out of me.
Yes.
I think that's a big one. And I think we don't realize how much that happens too. I've just been hearing recently about loss aversion and how apparently the single biggest motivator of human behavior is fear of loss. It's not, the anticipation of what you might gain. It's that you're terrified of something you think you're going to lose, which, from an evolutionary, the whole saber-toothed tiger thing, I understand.
Sure.
Right? You're afraid that if you take the chance, the saber-toothed tiger is going to get you and you will have no more chances because you'll be dead. But at the same time, that means you don't think about all the things you might get out of it. You don't think about how great it might be because you're too busy being afraid that you're going to lose this other thing. And,
right.
I think if you start to do yes and I'm saying, I think because obviously I need to play with this as much as anybody else, but, you start to see opportunities where you didn't know that there were any before.
Exactly.
I mean, I know
exactly.
I read years ago how, Tina Fey, when she was offered the Weekend Update gig on Saturday Night Live, just kind of looked at it and said, yes, and because that's, she'd been in Second City and that was like her whole thing. And it wasn't that she wasn't scared. She was just like, here's this thing. Pretty sure I should say yes to this. Not sure I can do it, but I'm going to give it a try. And now we all know who Tina Fey.
Right. Yeah, and the thing is too is what I will sometimes ask myself is, what's the worst that can really happen?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? What is the worst that can really happen? I mean, if you're offered a gig like that, what's the worst that can happen? You fall flat on your face and you totally bomb. All right, so what? You stand up, you brush yourself off, and you move on to the next one.
Right.
I mean, nobody has died of embarrassment.
Though many people probably have wished they could, at least momentarily.
I'm sure. As one of the world's biggest klutzes on the face of the planet, I've been in those moments. So I get that. But the reality is, if that's the worst that can happen, like, so what? In a couple of days, people will have forgotten about it. Or, you know what? You've got a great party story.
Yeah, and you might have learned something along the way that you wouldn't have learned otherwise.
You've absolutely learned something. There's always a lesson. That's always a gain, regardless of any experience you have, whether it's, even traumatic ones, which, you don't wish on anyone, but it's part of our lives. You still gain something from it because you learn something about yourself and the world around you.
Right. Yeah. And my mother said to me years ago, I don't know how many years ago now, but a good long while ago, what's the worst that can happen? Somebody says no, and you have nothing less than you had when you've asked.
Exactly.
Which honestly is how I got Rob Shearman and Kelly Flanagan to talk to me for this podcast. Like, what's the worst that can happen? They say no. They didn't. Hey.
Exactly. Exactly.
So that's always exciting because you're going, really? Really? You'll talk to me? That's awesome. Like, wow, I'm glad I asked, because otherwise I'd be sitting here going, I wonder if. And that's the other thing that I think people don't realize, because then if you don't take the chance, then you also have to live with wondering what would have happened if you had.
Yep.
And by the
Yep.
time you figure that out, if you haven't gone and given whatever it is a try, then it's too late. And you're sitting there going, I should have tried that thing.
Well, and it's funny you bring that up because that's actually something that I've always, it's sort of like a personal philosophy that I've always followed, is I would rather regret doing something and having that experience, regardless of what that experience is, whether it's wonderful, miserable, I feel like a fool, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather regret that than
Yes.
regret not doing it when the opportunity was there and never having the chance to do it again.
Right. There's a quote, those quotable cards. There's one that I saw on there once that's something like, what you'll regret in 40 years are the things you haven't done, not the things you actually did. So,
yes.
I mean, obviously there are exceptions to that. If you decide to kill somebody, I'm pretty sure you'll regret that, but that's not what we're talking about.
No.
I like to qualify things just because somebody out there is sitting there thinking,
absolutely.
Oh, I don't know. I can think of things.
Within the realm of reason and within the realm of the law.
Don't go get yourself locked up. Yeah. Those are the things. It's like, well, okay, yeah, it was crazy, but at least I tried it and I found out it was crazy. And, maybe it didn't work. I'm glad it didn't work, or it did work and here I am. But
exactly.
But at least you're not sitting there second guessing stuff you did 30 years ago because you didn't try it.
Right.
Which really is an awful way to live your life now that I'm thinking about it. Who wants to do that? Nobody wants to do that, but that's what loss aversion does. I think the coolest thing about finding out about loss aversion to me is that now I know it exists. And so now it's like, once you're aware of a thing like that, you can sit there and look at yourself and go, is this what I'm doing? And I think it gives you that perspective that you wouldn't have otherwise. So there's a little bit of awareness.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it goes a little bit deeper than the concept of risk aversion. Because loss is the reason for risk aversion, right?
Right.
So that's actually interesting. It's like a natural progression in that idea. Yeah.
And the research for this was apparently published like 40 years ago. I'm going, why am I only hearing about this now?
But that's fascinating.
It's out there, and I feel like it's something we should all talk about because it's controlling things we do and we don't even necessarily know about it.
Mm-hmm.
Making you say, dear professor, no, I'm not going to your audition because that's crazy and I'm going to fall flat on my face. Right.
Right.
Yeah. But look, what happened with you?
And in the last 20 something years, I can't even begin to tell you the number of times I've fallen flat on my face.
We all have.
And you know what?
Right.
But you know what? It's not so bad. And that's like, so what?
You're going to fall flat on your face somewhere, somehow, whether it's the big thing that scares you or the small thing that you're not even worried about. You're going to fall flat on your face somewhere.
You're absolutely right.
So you might as well make big mistakes. I mean, you talked about singing. I've been a choral singer for pretty much as long as I can remember. And, that's one of the things that conductors will tell you because they don't want their singers to be hesitant, and they'll say, look, if you're going to make a mistake, make a big one.
Right.
Make it loud enough that everybody can hear it, which of course is what strikes terror into your heart when you're a choral singer. You're like, no, that will ruin everything. But they have a point. It's hard to live up to that point sometimes, but they definitely have a point.
Well, I mean, I think we live in such a perfectionist society.
Yes.
Where, really the perfect is what's worshipped, from what we see in our celebrity culture and in magazines
and on Instagram
to on social media.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our friends aren't posting, the pictures of when their kids are having temper tantrums, which is probably happening more often than, they're smiling, eating watermelon by the pool.
Yep.
But those are the pictures we're seeing. And, I think this perfectionist society has led to such a fear of failure.
Yes.
And failure is so important to success.
Yeah, you can't really succeed if you don't fail.
No, my God, you can't. Exactly. You're not stretching yourself.
Not at all.
You're not challenging yourself if all you're doing is succeeding every time you do something.
Right. Because that just means you're doing the same thing over and over again.
Exactly. I mean, our greatest artists, our greatest inventors, are the most innovative people on the face of the planet who have made the biggest contributions to the world are failures.
Yeah.
They were failures until they had their one big discovery.
And some of them didn't even have their big discovery in their own lifetimes, like Vincent van Gogh.
Exactly.
Exactly. Everybody thought he was crazy.
Exactly.
And now look at him.
So, I mean, it's really important to embrace that. And for the record, Van Gogh was kind of crazy.
Well,
but he was really,
you know what I mean? they thought his work was horrible, because nobody.
Yes, no, I know, I'm teasing.
But
no, absolutely.
Well, he wasn't. I wouldn't say he was crazy. I would say he was mentally ill. But
yes,
nasty.
Yes.
But still. Sorry, I'm realizing lately how much I throw the word crazy around where I shouldn't. But yeah, and the other thing is, like, if you think about the people that you really connect with, they're not the people who have the picture perfect magazine life. They're the people where, where they're afraid, and where they've messed up, and where they're human. And it's the fact that they're willing to be that human that makes them relatable, that lets you connect with them and makes it possible for you to be that way with them. It's a two-way street. So if you're so busy projecting this aura of perfectionism, nobody can connect with you because they can't figure out
because it's superficial.
Right.
You can't connect to the superficial. You need something deeper.
Right. Which is why, sometimes I'll post crazy things on Instagram just because, I think they're weird, or I think they're funny, or I'm going to laugh at myself because I did this thing and look at this giant mess I made. And this is really kind of hilarious, because really it is, giant mess is a giant mess, but like embarrassment, it probably won't kill you. But
no, but it's authentic.
It is. I mean, and yet it's the thing that we resist. And I think it's that loss aversion thing again. It's like, oh, people will leave if they realize I'm not perfect. No, they won't. Actually, they're much more likely to stick around. It's like with teaching, where kids will say to me when I was tutoring, and they'd come in and they would say, I don't understand this assignment from my teacher. And I would look at it and I would say, yeah, I don't understand it either. And, so when's it due? Tomorrow. Great. Did you talk to your teacher about it? Or maybe it would be, a week later, but before they would see me again. And I would say, you need to go ask your teacher about it. And the look of horror on their faces. No, then my teacher will think I'm stupid. No, actually, your teacher will be really smart. Also, I'm really hoping that if you go and, and your teacher is forced to see that their assignment is really difficult to understand, that they'll realize that they should have done a better job. But that's probably too much to hope for. At least from my tutoring experience. But yeah, it's like, no, actually your teacher will think you're really smart because you wanted to get it right and you came in and you got more information.
Right.
And they don't see that. And we're, I mean, yeah, it's easy to say kids don't get it, but honestly, I don't think adults get it either a whole lot more than the kids.
No, they don't.
They really don't.
No, and it's what's tied into that a little bit is the fact that we're all our own worst critics.
Yes.
So asking the question, making the mistake, to anyone else watching us or being asked the question, it's just, all right, I'll answer. Or, oops, well, that stinks. That's a, annoying mistake to make, but oh well, move on. For us individually, our internal critics and that inner voice is just the worst.
It's deadly. It's deadly.
And I mean, it's something that I have always battled with. That voice in the back of the head. Oh, you're not good enough. Oh, you should have done that better. Oh, I can't believe you made that stupid mistake. Oh, you really need to ask that question. Nobody else seems to have the same question. That little
when the truth is other people do have that question and they're too afraid to ask.
Exactly. And, I don't think the trick is silencing that voice, because I don't think it's possible to do that for a lot of people. I think it's acknowledging it and just saying, well, I'm going to go ahead and ask the question anyway.
Yeah. And I don't think that it's really possible not to have an inner critic. I think anybody who tells you
No,
that
I don't think it is either.
lying or delusional. But
Yeah, I agree.
and the inner critic has its purpose. I mean, it's there to try to protect you. It's just that it goes
Absolutely.
over. So it's like you're saying, it's like to acknowledge it, kind of hear, okay, but then you have to assess whether or not what it's telling you is true and to what degree it's true if it is, because otherwise it'll just rule everything you do.
Mm-hmm.
Funny how we don't teach
Absolutely
stuff. We should be teaching kids how to do that.
Yeah, I feel like arts education starts to teach kids a lot of this, and I feel like English and literature can, because it's at least the good classes are about interpretation and understanding and empathy and all of that. I know when I was teaching, this sort of thing was a huge part of what I discussed with my students. Maybe a little more so in the drama class than in the English class, but we got into it in the English class as well. And I mean, look, it's oh my goodness, 15 years ago I left teaching. Oh, more than that. 18 years ago I left teaching because I taught back in 2000, 2001. Ouch. That realization hurts a bit.
I'm learning as I get older not to do that math any more often than I have to.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, look, the classroom was a very different place then than it is now because we weren't so teaching to the test like teachers have to these days, which I think, really sort of handcuffs them in terms of being able to teach a lot of, I mean, like one of the things I really wanted to teach my students was how to think. How do you critically think about things to form your own opinion rather than just regurgitating and parroting what other people are telling you your opinion should be about things. And
you can't teach that if you're forced to teach to a multiple choice test.
Exactly. But to teach that, you also have to teach about sort of this inner critic and the inner voice and listening to instinct or not listening to that inner critic because you hold an opinion that's different than everybody else's.
Right.
So I think when you're teaching to a multiple choice test, you sort of don't get to talk about the big ideas as much.
Yeah, and you also don't get to, take advantage of a teachable moment that crops up in class either, because that would be great, but, the state says I have to get through this today, so that's what we're going to do.
Exactly.
Which is part of why I don't ever see myself teaching in a public school. Private school, I didn't have to deal with it. I have endless admiration for people who can do the whole public school thing these days because of that.
Yeah, I couldn't go back to teaching in public school. I was in a Catholic school as well, so we were even a bit more relaxed, even 18 years ago. Than than it would have been. So,
but yeah, I think people forget that when you give everybody standardized tests, you are gonna end up with, to a certain extent, standardized people. Yep. And is that really what we want? I think that's what some people want, but if you really stop and think about it, that's not what we want. We want everybody to be all of who they are and to be curious and to, because critical thinking and curiosity go hand in hand. Any kind of arts, like you were saying, like, when you're talking about breaking down a script and figuring out how to approach a role, or if you're writing a story. I answered a question about this on Quora the other day because somebody said, does, creative writing teach critical thinking skills? And it's like, yeah. How could it not? The whole process of creative writing is asking questions.
Right, exactly.
You have to be able not only to imagine something, but you have to be able to question it in order to figure out what's not working or where it's going, or, should I cut this part? Any of it. And it's not just in the editing, it's also in the writing. I was amazed. Somebody else who, has higher degrees than me, answered and said, nope, there's nothing critical to that. It's all in the editing. And I thought, boy, I don't know how you write, but I don't think most people can write like that. It's not just spilling imagination onto a page. And even if it were, that all comes with critical thinking stuff anyway.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyhow, I didn't get into it with him because that's not what Quora is for. But it did make me really funny when I saw his answer. I was like, really? And you have a PhD?
Yeah.
Really?
Do you know what his PhD was in?
I don't know off the top of my head. I also
wondering if he was like an engineer answering.
Well, maybe, but it's also kind of like maybe he just hasn't really sat down and thought about it.
Well, that's true. I mean, if his process is is so intuitive that he doesn't actually realize he's doing it.
Yeah.
Which I think is common for a lot of artists.
Yeah.
If you break down the process too much, if you break down the approach too much, all of a sudden it kind of stops working.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just sort of, if it's just part of who you are and what you do. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
that's a good possibility.
Like who obviously, I had a physics professor in college, obviously brilliant at what he did, couldn't teach it to save his life.
Oh yeah.
Because it just comes that easily. The things that you
right.
We all have something that we do that comes so easily that we can't understand why other people don't understand how to do it. Sure. Those things, there's the school of thought, and I think it's largely true, that says, if you can't write about it or explain it to somebody, you don't really understand it. But I think there are exceptions with people like that who just get it on such a phenomenally intuitive level that they can't break it down because it just happens so naturally. It's like breathing. Like, how do you explain to someone how to breathe? I don't know. Do it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that makes those rules. Yeah.
So you did not end up doing this theater company out of, it did not just spontaneously come to you. And I know this because we met at work. So
right.
I'm curious to know,
I took a rather circuitous route to it.
Yeah. How did that all come together?
Well, my goodness, do you want the long story or the short story?
How long do you have?
Well, like I said, I took a circuitous route, and, graduating from a college like Lafayette with the loans that I had, and, not coming from a family that was independently wealthy and could just write a check to pay it off. I realized that I needed a more reliable job than actors traditionally have in order to be able to afford to survive. Mm-hmm. And so while I was kind of figuring things out, I never questioned wanting to pursue acting. The question was what's the best way for me to go about doing it? Upon graduating, I was like, okay, so what job am I going to get? And I was like, maybe I want to be an editor because I loved writing, and, that'll keep me in New York so I can go to auditions. Maybe I want to do this. Maybe I want to do that. And a teaching position opened up in St. John Vianney High School in Holmdel, New Jersey. And it was part-time, which was great because I had no teaching experience whatsoever. So it was sort of a way to ease in. It was junior level English, which was sort of right up my alley because it was the Brit Lit year, and that was what I loved most about my English studies in college. And, it was 2 classes a day. It was like a few hours, and I was like, this is perfect. I can do this and sort of start to establish a teaching career or get some teaching experience at least, while, having summers off and getting out of school early enough to head into the city for auditions or do whatever I needed to do there. So I got the job, and about 3 months into working there, the head of the drama department had to step down from her position, and they offered it to me.
Sweet.
So I was like, you know what? Awesome. I'll take it. And so now I was teaching a drama class on top of my English classes. And I was running the drama program, which meant I got to direct for the first time, 2 shows a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it also meant, though, that I didn't have much time to audition professionally.
Yeah.
And that was okay, though, because I was learning so much working with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I clearly was teaching them a lot because I had this background in my degree was in English and drama. I studied at the National Theater Institute and the Moscow Art Center. So I had all of this training that I would work with them to teach technique and that sort of thing. But their approach and their perception on things and just, their worldview taught me so much, and sort of having them experience the technique with such freshness and, without sort of experience of comparison, sort of brought out new things for me that I didn't realize, or, so I learned a ton. And, getting to direct, I realized, oh my God, I love directing too. And I don't think I'm half bad at it because I direct from an actor's perspective. And
Right.
So, my first year we did a Tom Stoppard, and everyone told me, you are nuts to do Stoppard with these kids. There are like masters and PhD academics who spend a career analyzing and trying to understand Stoppard. You're going to do Stoppard with these kids. And I said, well, you know what? I love his work. I think they can handle it. We're going to do it. So we did The Real Inspector Hound. And
Nice.
they got it.
Yeah.
And it was great, and it was hilarious, and it was so much fun. And we did Shakespeare. We did Midsummer.
Why not?
So they thought I was really crazy. You're Stoppard and Shakespeare. But you know what? Again, it was great. We had a ton of fun. And I realized after about a year and a half of teaching that as much as I loved working with the kids, this was not something that I wanted to do for the next, 30, 40 years of my life. That I did eventually want to get to the point where I could realize the dream that I had when I left college, which was to continue acting and to have my own theater company. And so trying to figure out a path there, I kind of said to myself, well, you have the acting training. You never stop with that, but, it's not something that you necessarily need to enroll in like a conservatory program or a graduate program. There are studios all over the city that provide incredible training. So,
Right.
You have your base in that, and that's easy enough. Any additional training you want is easy enough to pursue sort of on a one-on-one type of way. But I felt like I knew nothing about the business world, and I knew that having a theater, I was going to have an understanding of contract law and real estate and just sort of how the world worked from a business standpoint. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go to law school. And yeah. So I went and I took the LSAT and I applied to a few law schools and I got into Seton Hall. And I said, okay, you know what? For the next 3 years while I'm in law school, I am going to forget about theater. I'm going to be a law student. I'm going to be the best law student I possibly can be, do everything I'm supposed to do. And then at the end of those 3 years, I'll be able to get, the great job and then do what I really want to do. So I get to Seton Hall. I find a great apartment in the Ironbound of Newark. And my first night living in the apartment, I'm looking out the window and I look across the street and the old building, brick and stone building that's across the street from me has engraved, like carved in stone, the Ironbound Theater. And I just sat there and went, Mother Hubbard, I can't escape this. Like I was going to give it 3 years. And it's like, nope, that's going to be staring at you the entire time you're living here as a reminder.
Uh-huh. Wow.
So, okay, fine. So I get through my first year of law school. My second year of law school, things start off as usual. And a couple weeks into the first semester, I'm approached by a friend now, James Abels, who was a new first year at the law school and went to Lafayette. And so he's a year behind me at Lafayette. He was a year behind me as well at the law school. I didn't know him at Lafayette, but apparently he was friends with people that I had done shows with. So he had come to see all the shows that I was in. So he knew me.
Oh, wow.
And he was always interested in pursuing, like producing. So he said to me, he goes, "Want to start a theater company here at the law school?"
You really weren't getting away.
I mean, I literally you see those cartoons, I literally looked up at the sky and shook my fist. It was like, ah. So we put together a theater group,
right?
I know, exactly. So we put together a theater group in the law school, and we got funding through the Student Bar Association, and we staged Ayn Rand's Night of January 16th, which is actually a courtroom drama, and it has two alternate endings where you have a jury that comes back with either a guilty or non-guilty verdict, and the ending is different depending on the verdict.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. So that was a lot of fun. I both directed it and was in it. And I was like, okay, so you know what, this was great. This was a good way to, we sort of couched it in this being a fun and non-threatening way for budding litigators to get some experience, on their feet with public speaking. And that's kind of what sold it to the SBA. So a retired judge, Union County judge, came to see the show. And Judge Menza, he's since passed away, and he was always had the dream of being a playwright.
Oh, good.
So he came over to me. He came up to me, and we had this long conversation. And he was like, "You can't sacrifice your dreams. I understand what you're doing, but I ended up getting married out of law school and having two boys very quickly, so I could never pursue my dreams of being a playwright. Don't let that happen."
Wow.
And there was nothing I could do to say to the world, to the universe, to God, to whatever you believe in, that I am not following this path.
Yeah, no.
And so, he had a one-woman show that he was hoping to produce in New York, and he sent me the script and, was like, "Read over it. Let's work on it together." And I love Judge Menza. He was such a great guy, and unfortunately, he ended up getting sick and passing. So yeah. But by the time I got to my third year, I was leaving class to run into New York to take classes at HB Studios to make sure that my acting skills weren't getting, rusty.
Oh, wow.
As a result of being in law school. So
law school's not enough.
So my 3 years of not doing anything theatrical because I wanted to focus on law school never, ever happened. Sort of each year something, pretty big occurred to remind me of what my path was supposed to be. So, then on graduation, I got a job at a law firm, and I was, just working, but still, taking classes when I could. And I did a little community theater here and there when something interesting popped up, again, just to kind of keep my skills fresh. And I found myself one day sitting in my office wondering what they would do if I just let out a blood-curdling scream. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. And I
think a lot of people have had that feeling.
Yeah, oh yeah, especially lawyers. And,
that's what I hear, yeah.
And I was like, what would they do? Would they call the police? Would they just think I was too crazy to do anything and just leave me alone? I literally probably spent about a half an hour running through every possible scenario of what could have happened if I sat there and did that. And I realized I need to get out. I need to stop doing this. This is not healthy for me. And, I had been sneaking out of my office at 4:30 in the afternoon to go to the city for auditions or for, classes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I need to figure a transition out before I'm just fired.
Right.
Because this is not good. So I transitioned to working in knowledge management, which is more of an administrative type of position for a big law firm in New York, which was great because I was auditioning on my lunch breaks and after work. It was just much easier to do because I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I did a few projects in the city, a couple of festivals here and there, and some off Broadway stuff. And that was great because I met some amazing people, who I'm still friends with and still in touch with, and who are still doing incredible things in theater. And I learned so much, from just working with there's a huge difference between academic theater and professional theater. Just in terms of approach and the dynamic. And so that was a really great educational process for me.
Sure.
And then, interestingly enough, I transitioned to Princeton University, where we met, doing the same thing because the commute to New York was getting to be too much. And I realized that while I was getting cast in things, I wanted to do bigger things. I wasn't auditioning for Broadway. I'm not a musical theater person, and the plays that go up on Broadway and even off Broadway, they'll have their equity calls, but 9 times out of 10 they're already cast with named stars. And so if you don't have like a resume the length of your arm with really well-known theater companies already on it, like regional theater credits, your chance of even being seen or considered is nil. And so I wanted to be able to do sort of the great works. And, I had found myself in New York doing a lot of really good plays, but a lot of them were, workshops of like a workshopped version of a new play that some NYU grad had just written, which, you read it and you say to yourself, you know what, in like 5 years when this is really edited and refined, this is going to be great. But right now it's not so much. You know what I mean? Like the bones are there, but there still needs to be a lot of work. And it would have been different if like to be part of the process of that development is one thing, because I've done that as well. And that is an amazing experience. But to just be like, okay, we're just going to do this as part of sort of like a one-act festival. It's 2 performances. I wanted bigger. I wanted more. And I knew eventually I wanted to start my own theater company, and I wasn't going to be doing it in New York.
Right.
So I got the job in Princeton, which allowed me to learn a little bit more about the theater scene locally, which, is primary, aside from McCarter and Princeton, and there are the theaters in New Brunswick, right here in central New Jersey, most of the theater scene is community theater based. And there are some wonderful artists who are working in community theater. And so coming back and working here gave me a chance to network and meet some of the really incredible actors who are working locally in community theater and, doing things periodically here and there. And throughout that, there was a company called Shakespeare 70.
Yes.
That, they do mostly classical works, and nobody does that. And I love Shakespeare, and the opportunity to do Shakespeare is so few and far between. But it's a company that also casts out of their core group of actors. So, and they very rarely hold auditions. So they were holding auditions for Antigone. And, knowing the play, I kind of knew that there wasn't really a role that I was right for. Just by age and type, you get to a point where you kind of know where you fit. But you know what? I said, I'm going to follow the old adage that they tell you in theater school, and I'm going to go to the audition anyway so they can get to see me and see my work and get to know me, and maybe they'll think of me for some sort of future work. So I did that, And I gave, I guess, a really good audition because about 6 months later, I heard from one of the directors in the company, Janet, who works for another company called Simulations Inc., where they hire professional actors to do training in corporate industrials and,
Oh, wow.
videos and that type of thing. And I've been working with them now for the last 7 years, and it's SAG-AFTRA, you get a nice paycheck after you job.
Nice.
Yeah. So that is primarily sort of how I make my living as an actor. But again, it's like, who knew that the community theater audition would turn into this? And I also, I did another show at the Kelsey with my now partner in Pegasus Theatre Company, Peter Biscayer. That's how we met. And it was the worst experience of our lives, theater-wise. Like, we were sort of compatriots in misery.
Oh, wow.
But we kind of, as a result of that miserable experience, we both sort of realized that we each had this lifelong dream of having our own theater company. And we sat down together and we're like, why aren't we doing this? Like, what's holding us back at this point? We certainly can do it a lot better than this. We want a professional company where artists are being paid for their work, because too often we're taking advantage of our time and our talent.
Yes.
Because it's not quantifiable the same way, the work of an accountant or a doctor is,
right,
for example. And so we were just like, you know what? Let's do it. And I got pregnant shortly thereafter, which kind of ended up heightening my need to feel like I needed to do this. Because I wanted my daughter to grow up knowing that it's possible to live your dream. It's possible to have a dream about doing something with your life and making it happen.
Yes.
So yeah, that's been the last 4 years. And we started out performing at the West Windsor Arts Center. And we've been very successful there. So successful that we are now in transition and looking for our new home, because our own home, I should say, because doing two shows this season with just 2 weekends of performance for each show, our patrons were starting to ask, why aren't you doing more than 2, and why are you running them so slowly? I tell my friends, and by the time they're able to get here, you're closed.
Right.
And we want to run educational programming and do community outreach and all of that. But one of the things I am proudest of is we started off with our very first show saying we are paying everyone. And we figured out a way to make that happen.
Bless you.
And I mean, look, it's not a ton.
Still.
We were sort of incrementally increasing it, and we're aiming to be an equity house within the next few years. But it was very important to us that we pay everyone from day one. And we figured out a way to do that, and we managed to do that and still sell enough tickets to, cover ourselves and then some, to be able to keep producing.
It's like the yes and thing that we were talking about before, and the whole loss aversion thing. So many people would think of that and say, oh God, it would be great to do that, but there's no possible way. So we're not even going to try.
Right.
And I just think it's fantastic that you're like, nope, this is a priority and we're going to make it happen somehow, even if we don't know how, even if it's not very much. This is a really important thing. And yes. And
yeah, that's exactly what it was. We built it into the budget, and I think we were smart enough to pick shows that, weren't astronomically expensive to produce. I think we, both Peter and I have sort of been in the business long enough to have a reasonable expectation of what our audience sizes would be and what our income would be. So we were able to plan accordingly to be able to afford it. I think we were just smart about the approach. And so, this next big step we're taking is so incredibly exciting. And it's a little bit like taking a step off a cliff or, taking a step into the abyss, because at this point we have no idea where we're going to land.
Sure.
But I'm at the point where after, 20 years since graduating from college, class of 99, Lafayette, sort of every step of the way in my career up until this point has been guided in some way.
Yeah,
and I've just allowed myself to be open to those signs and open to, well, there's a little path there. Let me take a few steps down this way and see where it takes me. Oh, okay, there's another path that way. Let's go that way. And, each sort of landing point has been significant in getting us here. So I just have to trust that, and that's going to continue.
Yeah, definitely. But there's just, not that I'm an expert and not that I have a crystal ball, but honestly, having heard all of this, there's just no reason to believe that it won't.
Well, that's exactly right. At least that's what I tell myself on a daily basis.
No, really, come on. The Seton Hall story alone, there is no reason to believe that it won't.
Well, it's so funny because a couple of years ago, I went back to Lafayette to speak on a panel of alumni in the arts. And, one of the questions that a number of the students had was, how did you know that this is what you were supposed to do? And what was fascinating is there were 10 of us on the panel. And I would venture to say that 7 of us had similar stories where it was the universe would not let us do anything else.
That's
we kept trying, but no matter what we did, we kept getting funneled back into this, whether it was writing, whether it was acting, whether it was producing films, because we were from all different genres and mediums of the art. And I think it's a combination of those signs being there. Because I think everyone is given signs. I think if you're aware enough to experience in the world in a way that you are keenly observing the details around you,
mm-hmm.
I think there are things that you will observe that will suggest these yes and opportunities. I think too few of us are open to seeing them. And, how many people could have been in my position and, saw that across the street and said, that was an old movie theater. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with the type of theater I do.
Right.
Or had someone approach them their second year in law school and said, no, look, I made a commitment to doing this full on and I'm going to stick with that. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But I think,
so
I'm sorry, say that again?
We do that so easily. We say, no, just like we were saying.
Yeah, we discount, we ignore. Exactly. But I think when something is a part of who you are, and whether it's you're an artist, whether it's science is your, mode of creativity, whether it's painting, whether it's teaching, I think we all have these qualities that are a part of who we are. And when you're in touch with them, and when you are in touch with the joy it brings you, it's hard to ignore those yes and possibilities.
Certainly harder at the very least, but yeah.
But I think we're so often desensitized to those, even allowing ourselves to have those personal experiences.
Or we find things that we decide are signs that we shouldn't be doing something. you and I have talked before about how do you define success. And I think it would have been so easy for you to be working at that job in New York and going and not getting the kind of roles that you wanted, or, anything like that, that may have said, I wanted to be, headlining on Broadway by the age of X, and I'm not headlining on Broadway and I'm X+1. And therefore this is a sign that I shouldn't be doing this. And that's,
well, you know what though? It's funny that you bring up that example specifically though, because that was a big thing for me. I struggled for a long time in defining what success looked like for me, because for the longest time, family, friends, people who don't know sort of the full opportunities that exist within the theater and the arts world. Their understanding of success is you're either a Broadway star or you're a film star in Hollywood, right? And if you're anything less than that, then you're a failure in the industry.
Right.
And to a certain extent, that was ingrained in me. It was what I was hearing from lots of people. And I mean, it made me feel really bad about myself and my ability and what I was trying to do. And I had to get to a point to say, well, what is my definition of success? My definition of success is living a life in the theater. And how do I go about creating that within the life and the lifestyle that I want? Does it mean that I have to be on Broadway? No, it means I'm doing good work. It means I'm doing the kind of work that I want. It means I'm working with talented artists who are 9 times out of 10 better than me because I can learn from them. It means that theater is a part of my everyday life, whether it means I'm reading plays regularly to select our next season, or I'm preparing a role, or I'm preparing to direct something. It doesn't have to be Broadway or the silver screen.
Right.
And it took me a long time to get to the point where I was comfortable with that.
And I think there are more opportunities for things to happen more the way they've happened for you than people realize.
Absolutely.
Be doing something like that while being in suburban New Jersey or, suburban Kansas for all that matters. It's there. Some of it you may need to create for yourself, but that doesn't mean that you can't do that. Some of it may exist already, but that's all right. And, it's interesting because while you were talking, I was thinking about, I have a friend in Poland who is about 20 years old, I think, who I met online kind of by accident about a year and a half ago. And we just got to talking, and pretty quickly she said that she was trying to decide if she was going to just go get a regular university degree or try to go to drama school. And just in the way she was talking about it, she said, I want to be an actress, but that's just silly because, there's no jobs, there's nothing, there's no money in it and whatever. And, I told her, I was like, you know what? Literally, I just had this experience where I realized that this was a big part of me that I denied so well for so long that even I forgot it was there. And I said, I'm 25 years older than you. Do you want to hear from your 25 years older possible self? Because what I would tell you right now is go do it. Go do it in whatever way you need to. Go get the acting degree. Even if you end up not doing that, you'll know you did it for a while. And you'll have had that experience. It'll lead you to places that you would never have guessed because you don't know who you're going to meet there. You don't know what connections will lead to other connections. And just don't talk yourself out of it, because plenty of other people are going to try to talk you out of going to acting school and being an actress. They don't need your help. They've got that part covered. You need to be on your own side. And if you ever start to doubt yourself, you come find me and I will be your cheerleader because I wish what I'm telling you to do. And so,
that's awesome.
Even if you still end up, heaven forbid, working in, a bank or a desk job that And there are plenty of people who love working in a bank and working a desk job. But if you're really wanting to be an actor, that's probably not where you really want to be. But even if you end up doing something that isn't what you expected or isn't in the way that you expected, at least you'll have that. At least you'll be able to say for 3 or 4 years or whatever it ends up being, I got to do this thing that I really, really loved, rather than, like we were talking about before, looking back and saying, wow, I really wish I'd given it a try.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've always hated that advice that, you often hear in theater schools where, like the artistic director of the program will stand up and say, if there's anything else in this world you can do that will make you happy, go and pursue that and forget about acting.
Oh yeah.
But no, that's not what it's about. It's like, yeah, you know what? But the reality is, if there is something else in this world that will make you happy, then acting probably isn't for you. But it's not taken that way. It's taken in a way that is meant to be discouraging.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are meant to live a life in the arts, whether it's theater, whether it's painting, whether it's writing, if you're meant to live a life in the sciences, whether it's physics, whether it's engineering, whether it's computer science, that is something that is in your core.
Right.
I completely believe in, I believe in vocation. Like I always say that, like acting is a calling for me, the way people are called to the religious life.
Yeah.
There are other things I do that I enjoy. I liked working at Princeton. It was intellectually stimulating. I liked the people I met, clearly, because we're still friends. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like I was, miserable every single day I had to go into the office. But you know what? There was a part of me that, it felt like I chopped off my arm and had left it behind me.
Yes.
There was a part of who I am that was no longer a part of my life in the level of fullness that it should have been. And I think that's very different than saying if there's anything else you can do and be happy with, pursue that instead. It's whatever you feel like is so inextricably entwined with who you are.
Yes.
You have to pursue that. You cannot ignore it.
You really do. And, I think that advice comes from a point of, this can be really hard.
Trying to.
Or what you're in for before you decide this is what you want to do. But it doesn't come that way. It makes it sound like this is for the rarefied few who either won't do anything else or literally can't do anything else. It's almost, and if you say it like they can't do anything else, it's almost like it's a pity thing. You poor thing, you can't do anything else. You're stuck doing this really difficult thing where you're going to get doors slammed in your face for the rest of your life,
Exactly.
And I don't think that's where it's coming from, but I think they don't realize that's how it sounds. And, it can be such a destructive thing to hear because it makes you doubt everything.
Well, and especially because it's not like it's 40-year-olds hearing that. If someone said that to me now, I'd laugh in their face.
Right. Right.
When
you're 20.
But like it was me I was 19.
Yeah.
It's like 18 to 23-year-olds that are being told this.
Yeah.
And my God, you're a kid. You have no life experience. You have no way of putting that into context of real world life pursuits. I think it comes off differently than it's intended.
Yeah.
Which means the effect of hearing it is different than intended.
Definitely. And if you have a chorus of people sitting behind you saying, this is crazy, this is crazy, right? You're going to be broke in 5 years and you're going to be living in a box on the street. That kind of stuff is just like, so I'm not allowed to dream about anything. And I have to go get the boring job that's going to have me wondering about the blood curdling scream, which quite frankly, I think you should write a play about that. I would come see it. Totally would. But yeah, it's just too many of us live in places where we wonder what would happen if we let out that blood curdling scream. I think
absolutely
it's more people than we even would guess.
I think you're right.
But it's just like, what do we do to ourselves? We say no instead of yes and here's where we end up. So Anyway,
go for it. I think that's the moral of the story. Go for it.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yes, and. This is the yes and interview for sure. I love
I like it.
I do too. And I know I should let you go both for time and because your little one is home, but I love this conversation. Thank you so, so much. I knew it was going to be great. It was even better than I expected. So many, many thanks.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm glad I said yes and.
That's our show for this week. Thanks so much to Jennifer Nasta Zefutie for joining me. And to you, I hope that you will start to find opportunities in your life to say yes and to things rather than dismissing them out of hand. Please do tell a friend if you enjoyed this episode. Thanks so much. You can find show notes, the 6 creative beliefs that are screwing you up, and more at fycuriosity.com. I'd also love for you to join the conversation on Instagram. You'll find me at fycuriosity. Follow Your Curiosity is produced by me, Nancy Norbeck, with music by Joseph McDade. If you like Follow Your Curiosity, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to tell your friends. It really helps me reach new listeners. See you next time.